Hey, and welcome back to another episode. I'm really excited to introduce to you our guest. But before we get into that, I just wanted to let you know about our new Indiegogo campaign that we're running. So that way for season 6 and beyond, we can deliver more insightful and ad-free content to help leaders grow, think critically, and take action. We've been able to keep this show completely ad-free because I believe that leadership education should be free of distraction and it should be accessible to everybody. But in order to take it to the next level, I wanted to deliver more video content and move it into a dedicated studio so that way we can give you better content, better education, and we can talk to leaders that you want to hear from. So my goal is to raise enough so that we can improve our video and our audio quality and then move into a dedicated studio. But in order to do that, I need your support. And as a thank you, the first 20 people who donate $10 or more will receive a signed copy of my book and a personal shout out on the show. And also even offer up a guest spot on the show. Leadership isn't just a skill. It's a game changer for careers, businesses, and communities. Your support ensures that this podcast stays ad-free, expands into video, and reaches even more and aspiring established leaders. If this show has ever helped you grow in any way, now's your chance to give back. Click the link down below to help make a contribution, and so that way we can build another powerful year of leadership content, this time with video and in a studio. I am truly humbled by all of you who have already contributed, and thank you for being a part of this journey. Now, I want to introduce to you our guest, Jim Carlough. With over 30 years of leadership experience, Jim is an accomplished business strategist, speaker, and author. Having successfully driven explosive growth from healthcare organizations, from startups to industry leaders, Jim is a trusted expert in building high-performing teams, revitalizing underperforming businesses, and guiding organizations through transformational change. We're going to go right now, right into the mid of our conversation that we had just the other day. This is Tim Staten with Tim Stating the Obvious. What is this podcast about? It's simple. You are entitled to great leadership everywhere you go, whether it's to church, whether it's to work, whether it's at your house, you are entitled to great leadership. And so in this podcast, we take leadership principles and theories and turn them into everyday, relatable, and usable advice.
And a quick disclaimer, this show, process, or service by trademark manufacturer, or otherwise does not necessarily constitute an implied endorsement of anyone that I am employed by or favors them in representation. The views are expressed here in my show are my own expressed and do not necessarily state or reflect those of any employer.
Where did you come up with the idea to found your theory on the 6 principles?
I think that's a great place to start. And the reason is, it was really interesting to me to over the years, I've mentored a lot of people. But one of the things that in every single situation I found was they may have been very intelligent financially, could read financial statements, could do everything, but they didn't know how to deal with people. And that really was kind of the premise. And so as I continued to mentor people, I continued to find, at different parts of my career, different things that came up and how to handle them differently. Yeah, empathy is an example. I managed a team of 25, 30 developers and had a small, when I worked at Perot Systems, and it was an old piece of technology that we were sunsetting. And I had to tell the people, look, we're going to be sunsetting this product, but I don't want to lose you. And I really put myself in their shoes and said, what would I want my boss to, how would I want my boss to treat me if I was in this situation? And so what I said to them is, as we lose customers, we're going to have to make changes to the staffing. However, I'm going to make the following commitment to you. Number one, you'll have as much notice as possible. Number two, I will help you find a new job, whether internally or externally. Number three, if you want to learn the languages that we're programming the new technologies in, I will allocate the time to have people teach you that. Over a 3-year period, I had the lowest I'm losing the word off the top of my head this morning, attrition rate in the company. I had the highest employee satisfaction rate 3 years in a row, and I didn't have anyone leave the organization at all. Now, if your boss came to you and said your job's going away, most people would panic. But 100% of these people bought into the fact that I had their back and I understood their situation. And to this day, many of those people still reach out to me for advice. And so when I stumbled on these, tidbits of things, I kind of put them all in the back of my head. And then a year ago, I said, I think it's time I put this together for people and offer to help them. And so it's really from life lessons from early in my life through today that I use to come up with those ideas. And so anyway, to answer your question, I think that's a great place to start.
You had, those years of experiences, you were working with these people, and you took that approach of how do I want to be treated versus, what's best for the organization and how do I get, the organization to like their bottom dollar and forget the human element. And I think that's great that you brought the human element back to leadership. So Speaking of the human element in leadership, can you talk a little bit about the point where you talk about the power of humor in leadership?
Yes, I absolutely can. So what I have found, so I'm not a comedian, and I'm the first person to admit you can't try to be a comedian. But I have found when you're in a difficult situation, conflict situation, sometimes the easiest thing to do to break the ice is to make fun of yourself, whether it's making fun of myself or finding something humorous in what you're talking about to get rid of the tension in the room. Now, I also tend to be a practical joker. And so traveling with me is always fun because you never know what you're going to expect. You may have ordered a filet mignon, but you're going to get a hamburger and you have to deal with that. I mean, just stupid, corny stuff. And I found that in introducing humor in the situation, you take some of the emotion out of it. A lot of people react with emotion. And we see it every day in social media. To me, social media is just giving people a platform to be angry and to find things to complain about. But in reality, if you look at it from another direction, is there something funny in what's going on that can change the paradigm of the discussion? And so I have found often that, especially in conflict situations, when employees are having difficulty seeing the forest through the trees, is bringing them back down to earth with a little bit of humor. And, I had a situation once where two people, a manager and a subordinate, came to my office because they were having almost a yelling match at each other because they couldn't see the forest through the trees. And I sat them down in my office and I said, "What's going on?" And these are two people that have worked together 5 or 8 years. They got along together, they socialized together, but they were having such a conflict. I said, I got to understand what's going on. And I introduced a little bit of humor into the discussion as they were telling me this conflict that they were having. And to me, they actually were both right, but they couldn't accept the fact that they were partially right and how to get through that. And so I used humor to get through that. And what ended up happening, and I'll use the fact that they were both women, and it, not to be gender specific, but they then both, after we resolved the conflict with a little bit of humor, they both started to cry. And I said, "I don't understand, why are you crying?" And the one woman said to me, "Because you're always right." And I said, "No, I'm not always right." And they said, "No, you always do the right thing." Sitting us down, having a little humor, getting us to understand that we were missing the point of it, just really emphasized the fact of how you lead and how you manage. You always make the right decision. And so I've used humor in a lot of different situations. But again, it's not a stand-up comic thing. It's when there's when you're at a conflict or a crossroad and you can't get past it because of emotion or difficulty of people accepting somebody else's point, introducing a little humor tends to relax the situation. I mean, if you think back to when Ronald Reagan was president, he was probably the one who told the most jokes of any president in my lifetime. And I always liked the fact that, you know, his stories about the one I always remember is the chicken with three legs. And it just changes the paradigm when you can get people to relax a little. And he used it very effectively. And so, you know, that's something that I picked up and I've tried to use in those situations. So anyway, but I do think it's important for people to have fun and to enjoy what they're doing, because if they're not, they're going to burn out. In today's environment, you have to enjoy what you're doing. And if you can make it fun at the same time, you tend to get more accomplished. And so I use humor in that way, and it somewhat motivates people, but at the same time, get people to look at things from another perspective.
That's a great point that you made about Ronald Reagan, too, because I was actually scrolling through some reels late last evening, and Ronald Reagan came up and he was telling a whole bunch of jokes, and it was just so relatable. And like you said, it brings the heaviness of a situation. It makes it a little bit lighter, so that way you can decrease your emotions and work through it. And I like the point that you brought up where you said that they started crying because you do the right thing. So let's kind of shift this a little bit to, let's talk about trust and how to build trust and how you made that an integral part of your philosophy.
So I believe trust comes, you don't get trust automatically. You have to earn trust. And I earn trust through integrity. To me, the one pillar to me that's non-negotiable is integrity. And when I was 22 years old, I ran for a city council position in the hometown I grew up in New Jersey. And I won. Now, I had running mates that had been running for re-election, and I was a newcomer, but I won. And the city administrator asked if I could stop in and see him. Now, this is in the early 80s, so there were no cell phones. So, you know, catching somebody was when you caught them at home and they happened to answer the phone. And so I went out and I sat down with him. And so I was running in a general election in the same year I graduated from college. And he sat me down. He said, look, there's a lot of people who are going to give you a lot of advice. He said, you're a smart person. And he said, you did a good job in this election. He said, I'm going to give you one piece of advice. And this advice I have used my entire life since. And he said to me, when you go to bed at night, when you put your head on the pillow and before you close your eyes, I want you to ask yourself one question. Did you do anything today at the expense of anyone and for your own personal benefit, whether right or wrong? And to this day, I still do that. And I tell my teams, you will always get the straight answer from me. I will always be honest with you, and I will always be deliberate in my actions. And that builds trust. People want a leader who's going to be consistent, going to be there for them, going to have their back. And I'm all for making mistakes, because we learn from mistakes, and we can't be afraid to try something. But from my perspective, you have to do it with integrity. And that was very prevalent when I ended up working at Perot Systems, who's, as an organization, I mean, Mr. Perot, who was an Annapolis graduate, was very, very smart, but he was a great leader. And he operated with unwavering integrity. And I sort of, you know, for me, it was kind of, I'm glad I finally found a home where the people here all have the same, I didn't know at the time, but pillar of integrity. And that builds enormous trust amongst your teams. And my teams know that they're going to get the straight answer the first time. And if I don't have the answer, I'm not going to make it up. I'm going to go find it and come back to them and give them the answer, right or wrong. And so to me, building that trust is critical. The moment you lose the trust of your people, you're over, because they'll no longer be loyal. They'll no longer follow you into battle, and they'll start to become self-serving at the expense of the organization. And to me, that's non-negotiable. And so that's the one pillar I'll start every discussion with, or every talk with, and talk about why having unwavering integrity is non-negotiable. There's too much in this world that lacks that, I believe. And if you look at the divide in the country, you can look at it from a number of different ways, but you're a former military person. I mean, you would follow your leader into battle because you knew they had your back and you knew you could trust them as a leader. And that comes from integrity.
No, absolutely. Completely agree with you on integrity and developing that and developing trust. Let's say I'm a new leader and I'm put into different positions and I'm wanting to develop myself. Is this something that I'm born with, or is this something that I can develop?
I'm a firm believer that leaders are made and not born. Now, there is some sense of, or some semblance of scientific evidence that leaders, there's some sort of gene that the average person may have that will make them a good leader, but you still have to learn. It's a learning process. And I'm a perfect example of that. I wasn't born with an IQ of 10,000 or 150 or anything of the sort. I was an average high school student. I was an A student when I got to college and my brain woke up. Well, that's at least how I explain it. And so I believe having a good mentor, having an open mind, and having the ability and desire to want to be a good leader and be willing to commit to learning how to become a good leader is something that has to be invested in, and it's not something that I think is a birthright. Now, you may come from a family where everyone ran for governor. That's great. They may be great at politics. They may be great at being a leader, but I still believe that they develop that capability, whether it be through family or friends or schooling or whatever, and they develop those capabilities. It's hard for me, growing up in a typical middle-class family home. My dad had been a military person in World War II. He worked in a factory. My mom worked in a department store. We always had food on the table. Many times didn't have seconds, but we had food on the table all the time. But I wasn't born with innate ability to lead. That had to be developed. And I had to learn that, and it was a learning process my entire career. And so part of me now is at the point where I want to give that back, and I want to help other people do the same thing by giving them some of the nuggets that they need to learn in order to build high-producing teams. And so that kind of was how this all started to roll out.
You mentioned about mentorship and seeking out mentorship. And then you also say that, effective leadership is built on continuous learning and development through mentorship and structured feedback mechanisms. Can you just expand upon that a little bit? Because I fully believe in mentorship and mentorship programs and informal mentorship. To those out there who are unfamiliar with what that is, can you just expand upon that?
Oh, great question. So what I've always done is I've always looked to my manager as being a mentor. But going back about 25 years ago, there were a couple of other people that I worked with who were higher in the organization than I was. And I sought them out and asked them if they would be a personal coach to me. And I was very nervous about it the very first time I did it. And I approached, and this guy's name was Mike, and I had worked in Mike's organization once or twice as he moved around the company. And I said, would you mind being a mentor to me, giving me guidance, telling me what to do, having, where do I seek to learn more about the organization or what we do or just life in general? And he said, absolutely. And so we started meeting monthly for an hour, and we would just review the things that were going on at work for the last month and what my plans were for the next month. And it really gave me a different perspective, because it also allowed me to work closer with my manager on the things that Mike was giving me feedback on in terms of things that I could do to help improve and move upward within the organization. And it got me exposure to other executive leaders at the same time. And so once I got over the apprehension of that, I continued to seek out mentors. And I was very, very lucky to have worked with some great mentors and managers and leaders in my career. Now, like everybody, there are people that I have worked for that lacked integrity and lacked things that I believed in, and in some cases was initially misled about that person in the interview process, and then regretted making a decision to work in a particular organization. But those are very, very few in terms of stops on my career path, but you learn from them. So, but finding a mentor, I encourage anyone who wants to benefit or better themselves in leadership to find a mentor either within the organization that they work with or for, or just somebody they're impressed with on LinkedIn. A lot of people are willing to be a mentor. I probably today, right now, I'm mentoring about 8 different people. Now, not every one of them is on my calendar once a month or even once a week, but they come to me for advice, or when they have a conflict at work or just trying to work through something, they'll reach out and say, hey, do you have a few minutes to talk? And I always open my calendar to that. So if someone's listening and they want me to mentor them, I do have limited time, but they certainly could reach out to me as well. And I would certainly be open to, mentoring anyone. But to me, I think it's always important, again, if you really want to move up through leadership, to make sure that you're continuing to meet people at those levels to expand your own horizon. And it really has helped me in my career. That is for certain.
No, I am a big fan of mentorship and pushing mentorship and having other people seek out mentorship, because, as you said, it opens your horizons and it gives you exposure to things that you might not necessarily get exposure to on a day-to-day basis. So I think, like you said, mentorship is incredibly important. And you mentioned, how you're currently mentoring about 8 people. And I know the listeners are going to be jumping on the fact that they're going to be able to look at your socials and the descriptions below and see where they can connect with you and reach out with you, especially after listening to your key and incredible insights that you have. But I get this sense from you that you also feel that leadership doesn't start when you sit down at your desk, right? So can you walk through on how you envision, how does it start for you, like when you wake up in the morning, or does it start for you when you get to work?
So that's a great question. If you want to be a leader, you're a leader 24/7. Now, I am not in charge of my household. My wife is, but that doesn't mean I don't get up in the morning and behave like I'm a leader. I do. I get up in the morning, I make the bed. Most mornings we'll do it jointly. But to me, making the bed is the start to the foundation of the day. And so when I look at the aspect of when does it start, a lot of people believe that when they sit down at the desk and turn the computer on is when they start. I don't believe that. I believe it starts as you drive to work. I believe it starts with the first interaction when you get out of your car in a parking lot to walk into a meeting or to walk into your office. And it starts with every interaction that you have. I once worked in an organization where the CEO took the freight elevator up to his office every day because he didn't want to interact with people, or that's what I believed. And to me, that's not a leader. To me, a leader is with the people all the time. You're always on, you're always there, willing to help. And it's you've got to have a passion for it. If you don't like people, you are not going to be successful as a leader. And so to me, it's a 24/7 commitment to being a leader. When you go to the store, as simple as greeting people, having brief conversations with people who you don't know and being comfortable with that, because we can learn from everyone we interact with. And I totally believe in that. And so to me, leadership is 24/7. You sign up for it and you're always on. Whether you're in a uniform or not in a uniform doesn't mean you're off duty, doesn't mean you're not a leader. It just means you're leading in a different way. And so I truly believe that is a permanent commitment that one has to make to the job at hand and to the role itself.
No, absolutely. And I think you really hit the nail on the head when you wrote the book, The 6 Pillars for Essential Leadership. So could you just kind of briefly explain, if somebody was to reach out and get a copy of the book, what could they expect to see?
They're going to see 3 things, and they're going to get 3 things out of the book, because 3 things are consistent in most of the chapters. Number 1, they're going to get a pillar that I truly believe in is necessary to be a leader. So I'm going to describe what it means. Take compassion as an example, or empathy as an example. Here's what it means to me, because compassion and empathy are 2 different pillars, and understanding the differences between the 2 are very, very important. So they're going to get not only why I believe that is, most chapters will also have a personal story to give reflection on it. And all of the chapters include references to individuals who are leaders today, other than myself, and people that they would know their names, and how they have used that in their careers. Now, not to get political or whatever, but if you look at Elon Musk, his singular focus is putting people in outer space. And that focus, to him is where he's leading people, and everything he does is still to hit that vision and move the needle in that way. If you look at Amazon, Bezos at one point early in the Amazon's storyline, and this is in the book as well, they were having a terrible time in customer service. They were getting beat up left and right for poor customer service, poor responsiveness, and everything. And he felt the only way to fix that was to live it. So he took a desk and he put it in the center of the customer service department and sat at that desk to work with the people to get through it all. And so in the book, there are references to real life examples, not just U.S. examples. Nelson Mandela's referenced in the book. Abraham Lincoln's referenced in the book. But you can then learn how other people have used that characteristic in their own leadership. And then in some of the chapters, there's even some personal exercises that people can use. So to me, this wasn't an opportunity for me to just, provide information about my life or my career, but it was also to help people develop the trait themselves by looking at other people who may exhibit that same trait. And I think that's a significant difference in most books that you see about management. What I tell people when you read a sales book as an example, you can't implement that book. That book made that person who wrote it successful in the industry that they were in at the time that they were in it, and all of those ducks had to be in a row. And so I tell people, if you read a business book, take one item out of that book and implement it. And I wanted to be different. So what I did is I wanted to come up with 6 pillars that everybody could take advantage of that would make them a better leader, because I wanted to also demystify that you can implement a book. And so I like to think that my book is a roadmap for someone who wants to get the key characteristics of leadership that will help them excel. And so that's the foundation and the takeaway from the book itself.
It definitely is a roadmap, Jim. So after having read through the book and having reviewed it before our conversation today, it definitely lays itself as a roadmap, because I'm a huge proponent of, I think everybody needs great leadership and you deserve great leadership, and you yourself, if you're going to be in leadership roles, you should be the best leader possible for those around you. So people don't have to suffer with you. They can work and grow along with you. So I really love your book, Jim, and I really appreciate you being on the show. We could sit here and we could talk for hours and hours and hours on each and every pillar that you have in the book, from integrity to empathy to compassion, and then also how we opened it up about implementing humor into leadership to de-escalate situations and lighten things up so we can get to the root of the problem. So Jim, I really appreciate you being on the show today. I want to leave all my guests with the last word. So is there anything that you didn't get to say, or a question that I didn't get to ask that you just like, you know what, I have to say this before we end?
I would say that if anyone has a question about anything we've talked about, and I'm not suggesting you have to buy my book, send me an email. I'll gladly answer your question. I am extremely approachable, and a lot of times people who write a book like to hide behind the book and don't want to mingle. I'm an open book, and so my email is jim@jimcarlough.com. And if anyone listening just wants to connect with me, they can connect with me on LinkedIn, or they can shoot me an email directly, and we can start a conversation. Whether they agree or even disagree with my principles, I'm open to that discussion. So again, I'm an open book, and I would offer that to your network of people and your guests. And hopefully, Tim, from my perspective, I would look forward to future conversations with you. This has been a great opportunity to interact and to learn from each other.
Hey, Jim, well, I really appreciate it. I'm going to provide everybody the links to how to get in contact with you in the descriptions, so that way you don't have to go back and rewind what you said, so everything's spelled correctly and put out there so people can reach out to you. And I really appreciate you being here. So thanks, Jim. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well. Thank you for your time today.
As always, thank you for stopping by and checking out this episode and listening to it. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Before we go, I'd like to ask a favor of you, if I could. If you could please share this episode with one or two people who you think might like this topic. If you haven't followed or subscribed on the platform that you're listening to, and hit all the bells and icons and all the whistles so that you know that when we post another episode, you'll be alerted, please go ahead and do all that before you go. If you got some value out of this episode, please leave a review or a comment so we can help spread the show to other people who might be interested in the topics that we've talked about here today, but may not have found our show yet. Again, thanks for stopping by. I'm Tim Staten.